Earlier, I spoke with Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council. Please take a listen. Kevin Hassett joins me now from the White House. He is the director of the National Economic Council. Kevin, it's good to see you. You and I have known each other for a while. In my experience, you have been respectful, if not always admiring, of the independence and the believability of government data. How comfortable or uncomfortable are you, Kevin, with the president's decision today to fire the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
You know, if you look at what's been happening to the payroll data especially, then it's been subject to massive revisions. Really, it began during COVID, where the mean absolute revision was north of 100,000 jobs, which is often meaning the revision is bigger than the typical number. And after COVID, it didn't really get much better. And so there's a heck of a lot of noisiness in the labor market data right now, which is bad for markets, it's bad for transparency, and it's something that I think a fresh set of eyes should really look at and try to fix, because the jobs number, you know, they need to be independently produced, but they need to be reliable and not subject to massive revisions. And so there needs to be a big research project over at BLS to figure out why is it that the numbers are so unreliable these days? Why are they being revised so much? And to put it in perspective, the revision over the last 2 months outside of the COVID years is the biggest we've seen since the 1970s. And we're in an age where there's so much data everywhere and everybody's got a computer, and there's so many ways to scrape things and learn things, that to have data that's way noisier now than it was 10, 15 years ago is really something that people should be puzzling over. And so I think a fresh set of eyes helping folks with that problem is the right answer, and that's what the president's judgment is too.
Kevin, forgive me, though, that's not what the president said. The president said that this was politicized, that this was intentionally manipulated to deceive the markets and deceive the country. What you just outlined is a perfectly acceptable academic inquiry into the methodology of government data collection. But that's not what the president said.
Well, the president just saw massive revisions right after he saw some very good numbers, and it would be very unfortunate if the data agencies kept revising. And if you go back and look at the pattern of revisions in the Biden administration, you could see how a political person would look at that and say, oh, there's partisan bias in those numbers. I can remember way back in the day, there was a huge GDP number that came out right before President Obama was running against Mitt Romney, and then that whole thing got revised away after the election. I think people worry about partisanship in data all the time, and they're right to worry about it. But in the end, what we need is to make sure that the data are reliable and transparent and aren't being revised all over the place, because when they're being revised all over the place, it creates at times the suspicion that something's wrong with the numbers.
Cynthia Loomis, Republican of Wyoming, just told reporters on Capitol Hill, Kevin, the statistics are what they are. I think it's kind of impetuous to fire the statistician without first knowing whether the numbers are inaccurate.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the sequence of revisions that we've seen and how enormous they are, then, think about it, the mean absolute revision post-COVID is bigger than a relatively healthy number that came out this month. It's bigger than that number. So that revisions are bigger than the numbers they're trying to estimate. That's a problem. That's a clear problem.
When others in your realm, meaning other economic advisors to the president, talked to reporters earlier today, they did not dispute the numbers. They found underlying parts of the data that pointed in positive directions, wage growth and the like, but they didn't dispute the numbers. They said, well, we're not so happy with them, but the numbers are what they are. And you know, Kevin, that in this environment in which we now exist, the president's action will be interpreted as something he didn't like, and therefore, because he didn't like it, he took an action. Doesn't that raise in the minds of anyone who is a nonpartisan observer of market data that there is, by the president's own actions, partisanship now demonstrably inserted into this?
I think that the president hopes, as we all do, that we'll get a person that we can all trust can put the numbers ahead of everything else. And that when you see revisions that are correlated with political things, then you can wonder about it. And so it's very natural, as the president has done throughout the government, for him to want to put his own people in important jobs. And this is one job that he's going to change, but it's, there's hundreds of jobs that he's changed.